Afternoon, everyone. Now, continuing where we left off yesterday with the capitulation on November 1918, how things worked out with the Germans and the British, who were also there, was all the British really had to say in the matter was that the blockade was going to continue. And that was the main thing that brought Germany to the bargaining table in the first place, was so this way their people could get some food. But the British and the United States and the French were all in the same boat, where they were saying that the blockade that was going to be imposed against Germany was going to be maintained. And it was going to be kept that way until a formal treaty was signed. And so Germany was having to deal with these harsh terms, and the people of Germany once again were starving. And during the time between November 1918 and June of 1919, when the treaty was finally signed, the Treaty of Versailles, over 900,000 German men, women, and children all died of starvation during that time. Something that could have very easily have been easily been prevented. And Germany actually went to the British during all this and said, "We have gold. We can pay you for the food. Let us pay you for the food." The British said, "No, keep your gold." The reason for that being was at Versailles, the British seized all the German gold. So that's what happened there. And the Germans were able to work out, what can we do to get some food? And the British said, "Surrender your merchant fleet." So the Germans completely surrendered their merchant fleet. The British let some food through, and then they put the blockade back in place. So meanwhile, during this time, all these people were starving. Meanwhile, Germany's children were ones paying the biggest price, because they were being denied omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, which are vital for brain development, particularly in the areas of compassion and empathy. We'll come back to this. But it was so bad that in the early 1920s, it was discovered that children in Germany who were 3 years old were the same size as children who were 18 months old in the United States. That is how bad the starvation was. In the areas where the brain development was so damaged, in the absence of empathy and compassion, so many years later, during the times of the Second World War, people were asking, how did Hitler get so many young people who were willing to do such horrible things? It traces back to this, because there were so many people who were deprived of those essential nutrients. It was much easier for them to do horrible, cruel things. So that's a reason. It's not a justification, but it does link back that this was a factor. So Germany's children and their people were starving, all in the name of revenge. Herbert Hoover, who was eventually become President of the United States, was put in charge of European relief by President Wilson. He actually was able to get 34 million tons of food and supplies into Europe to help the starving people of Europe, everywhere except Germany. Lloyd George would not budge. Herbert Hoover actually begged Lloyd George, "Let me get food into Germany." He held his ground. The blockade still stayed in place. Regular food shipments would not actually enter Germany until the early 20s. Meanwhile, the Allies said, "We're keeping the blockade in place." Neutral Holland and neutral Norway said, "We're not doing it. That's absurd." So they tried getting food into Germany. The Royal Navy seized those ships. So they were forced at gunpoint to stop doing that. What was to be gained by punishing Germany further? That's the problem. So many millions of Germans died of starvation, a slow, painful death that could have easily been prevented. So that's some of my thoughts on that one. There you go.